Hello, my dear listeners. How are you on this beautiful day? I hope you're doing wonderfully, because today I have a story for you that will stir your emotions from the very first minute to the last. A tale that proves true love knows no boundaries, that it doesn't matter where you come from or what your social standing is. When two hearts are destined to meet, nothing in the world can keep them apart. Today, I'm going to tell you the story of Eleanor, a young woman with a pure heart who worked as a housekeeper, and Marcus, a millionaire entrepreneur who discovered that all the money in the world means nothing without love. But be warned, because in this story, we also meet Evelyn, a woman who did everything in her power to destroy her own son's happiness. And when she discovers that Eleanor is expecting not one, but 3 babies, well, that's when things get truly intense. Before we begin, I want to thank each and every one of you who join us day after day. You are what makes this channel meaningful. Your comments and likes motivate us to keep telling these soul-stirring stories. And speaking of which, I love knowing what you're doing while listening to me. Are you preparing dinner? Walking your dog in the park? Perhaps tidying your closet on a Sunday afternoon? Or are you at work, taking a moment to escape the daily grind? Tell me in the comments, because I'm fascinated to imagine where you are and what you're doing when you share these moments with me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button if you're ready for an unforgettable journey. Now, buckle up, because the story of Eleanor and Marcus is going to be a ride full of emotions you'll never forget. Eleanor Hayes had always been a simple girl. At 22, she woke up every day at 5 a.m. to arrive punctually at the Sterling family mansion. She wasn't just another employee. She was meticulous, dedicated, and had a special way of making that enormous house feel more welcoming. Her steps were always silent on the marble floors. Her delicate hands arranged every detail with perfection, and her shy smile illuminated even the darkest corners of that imposing residence. The mansion was located in one of New York City's most elegant neighborhoods, with its perfectly manicured gardens and imposing architecture that impressed anyone passing by. Eleanor had worked there for 6 months, and during that time, she had barely exchanged more than a few polite words with the owner of the house. Marcus Sterling was a 35-year-old man, known as one of the country's most successful businessmen. He ran an empire of construction and investment firms, always dressed in impeccable suits, always with that serious expression that seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. Mrs. Evelyn, Marcus's mother, was truly in charge of the house, an elegant 60-year-old woman, always dressed in expensive clothes and a posture that made it clear she knew exactly her place in society. She treated Eleanor politely, but there was always a coldness in her gaze, as if she were constantly evaluating whether the girl was fit to work in her home. "Eleanor, remember the dining room porcelain must be polished with great care," Mrs. Evelyn would say in her firm voice. "Those pieces cost more than many people earn in a year." Eleanor always responded with a respectful, "Yes, ma'am." But inside, she wondered how such a vast difference could exist between the world she grew up in and this place where she now spent most of her days. She had been born and raised in a modest home, where her mother worked as a seamstress, and her father was a bricklayer. They didn't have much, but they had love, laughter at the dinner table, and the feeling that they were united against any difficulty that arose. Marcus, on the other hand, always seemed to live in a completely different world. He left early for work, returned late, and when he was home, he spent most of his time locked in his study, taking important calls or analyzing documents that seemed to decide the fate of entire corporations. Eleanor saw him from afar, always polite, always discreet. But there was something about him that intrigued her. Sometimes, when she was organizing the library and he passed by the hallway, She caught a glimpse of his eyes that seemed to carry a deep sadness, as if behind all that success, there was an emptiness he didn't know how to fill. It was on a Thursday afternoon that everything began to change. Eleanor was in the kitchen organizing lunch dishes when she heard a strange noise coming from the study. It sounded like someone had dropped something heavy on the floor. She paused for a moment, listening, but heard nothing more. A few minutes later, Mrs. Evelyn arrived home, carrying several shopping bags. "Eleanor, where's Marcus?" she asked, taking off her sunglasses. "I need to talk to him about tomorrow's dinner." "He's in his study, ma'am," Eleanor replied, drying her hands with her apron. "He arrived from work an hour ago and went straight there." Mrs. Evelyn nodded and hurried upstairs, but a few minutes later, Eleanor heard a scream that made her drop everything she was doing. It was Mrs. Evelyn, and her voice was filled with desperation. "Eleanor! Eleanor! Come here quickly! Call an ambulance!" Eleanor rushed upstairs, her heart pounding so hard she could hear the sound echoing in her ears. When she reached the study, she saw Marcus lying on the floor, unconscious, with Mrs. Evelyn kneeling beside him, trying to wake him. "Marcus! Marcus! Answer me!" she cried, her hands trembling as she tried to check if he was breathing. Eleanor didn't hesitate for a second. She grabbed the phone and called emergencies, quickly explaining the situation and giving the address with the firmest voice she could muster. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics worked quickly to stabilize Marcus before taking him to the hospital. Mrs. Evelyn went with him, leaving Eleanor alone in the mansion, with a heart heavy with worry. She couldn't stop thinking about the look of pain she had seen on his face before he lost consciousness, and how desperate Mrs. Evelyn had seemed, a woman always so controlled and firm, who had suddenly transformed into a terrified mother at the possibility of losing her son. Hours later, when Mrs. Evelyn returned from the hospital, her eyes were red from crying. She sat in the living room, hands trembling, and looked at Eleanor with an expression that mixed fear and exhaustion. "It's a brain tumor," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "The doctors say it's serious, very serious. He'll need surgery, but before that, he'll need treatment and we don't know if—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but Eleanor understood perfectly what she was trying to say. From that day on, everything changed in the Sterling mansion. Marcus returned home a few days later, but he wasn't the same man. The medication left him weak and sometimes confused, and he needed constant care. Mrs. Evelyn hired private nurses, but during the day, it was Eleanor who ended up taking care of most of his needs. She prepared his special meals, organized his medicines at the correct times, and was always nearby when he needed something. At first, Marcus tried to maintain his usual demeanor, as if it were possible to ignore what was happening to him. "You don't need to worry about me, Eleanor," he would say when she appeared with a cup of tea or to ask if he felt well. "I'm sure you have more important things to do." But Eleanor saw through that facade. She saw how he sometimes paused mid-sentence, lost in thought, or how his hand trembled when he tried to sign important documents. As the weeks passed, something was changing between Marcus and Eleanor, and both knew it, though neither had the courage to speak about it. Her care for him went far beyond what any employee would do, and the way he looked at her when he thought no one was watching revealed feelings he himself was still trying to understand. It was as if the illness had broken down all the social barriers between them, creating an intimacy that grew with each passing day. Eleanor began to notice small details she hadn't seen before. The way Marcus smiled when she entered his room with breakfast, or how he always found an excuse to chat with her for a few more minutes when she came to check if he had taken his medication. "Eleanor, you don't need to be here all the time," he would sometimes say. But his tone made it clear he actually wanted the exact opposite. "Are you sure you don't have more important things to do?" "There's nothing more important than caring for someone in need," she always replied, adjusting the pillows behind him or setting the air conditioning temperature. Besides, you shouldn't be alone. What if he feels unwell again? The genuine concern in her voice made Marcus feel something he hadn't experienced in a long time. The feeling that someone truly cared about him as a person, not just as the successful businessman or Mrs. Evelyn's son. It was during one of those conversations that Marcus realized he was completely in love with her. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Mrs. Evelyn had gone out to lunch with friends. Eleanor was sitting in the armchair beside his bed, reading a book aloud, because he had mentioned her voice helped him relax. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating her face in a way that made her look almost angelic. When she stopped reading and looked at him to ask if he was enjoying the story, Marcus felt his heart race in a way that had nothing to do with his illness. "Eleanor," he said, his voice more serious than usual. "Can I ask you a question?" She closed the book and turned completely towards him, giving him her full attention. "Of course, Mr. Sterling. What would you like to know?" He remained silent for a moment, as if gathering the courage to continue. "Why do you care for me with such tenderness? It's not just your job, I know. There's something more, isn't there?" Eleanor felt her face flush, and for a moment, she didn't know what to say. She had asked herself the same question so many times, trying to understand why her heart raced every time he smiled at her, or why she worried so much when he seemed to be in pain. "I believe you are a very special person," she finally said, her voice almost a whisper. "And when we see someone special suffering, it's natural to want to help." "Special how?" Marcus asked, leaning slightly forward. "Explain what you see in me that's special." The question caught Eleanor completely off guard. She looked at this man whom everyone saw as powerful and inaccessible, but whom she knew in moments of vulnerability no one else had witnessed. "I see kindness," she said after a few seconds. "Even when you're in pain, you always worry about not causing too much trouble. I see intelligence, not just for business, but for understanding people. And I see sadness too, a sadness that existed long before the illness." Her words touched Marcus in a way he hadn't expected. No one had ever spoken to him like that, as if they truly knew him inside out. "You're right about the sadness," he admitted. "I always felt alone, even surrounded by people. I always thought success would fill that void, but it never did. Until you came here." Eleanor felt tears welling in her eyes. "Mr. Sterling." "Don't call me Mr.," he said, reaching out to gently touch her face. "Call me by my name." "Please," she nodded, unable to speak. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something, and if I don't tell you now, maybe I'll never have another chance." He took a deep breath, as if preparing to jump off a cliff. "I fell in love with you. Completely, irrevocably, in love. From the first day you walked into this house, something in me changed, but I was too cowardly to admit it." The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Eleanor looked at him, eyes full of tears, trying to process what she had just heard. "Marcus," she finally said, her voice trembling. "Are you sure about what you're saying? It's not just the illness, or the medication, or fear making you think that—" "No," he interrupted, his voice firm despite his physical weakness. "It's none of that. It's you, Eleanor. It's the way you laugh when you think no one sees you. It's how you hum softly while folding clothes. It's how you worry when I'm late taking my medication. It's how you turn this house into a home just by being in it." He paused for a moment, trying to find the right words. "I always lived an empty life, full of obligations and expectations, but without true love. And now that it might be too late, I discovered that love was here all along, taking care of me, being gentle with me, showing me what truly matters in life." Eleanor could no longer hold back her tears. "Marcus, I feel something for you too," she admitted, her voice almost inaudible. "But this is so complicated. Your mother, our social difference, your illness." He shook his head, interrupting her worries. "None of that matters. The only thing that matters is what we feel for each other. Eleanor, I may not have much time, and if these are my last months, I want to live them truly happy. I want to live them with you." She leaned forward and took his hand in hers. "Then let's live," she said, her voice gaining new determination. "Let's live every moment as if it's a gift." Marcus smiled, a more genuine smile than any she had ever seen on him. "Are you sure, even knowing all the problems this might bring?" "I'm sure," Eleanor replied, squeezing his hand. "True love is worth any sacrifice." At that moment, Marcus pulled her towards him and kissed her softly, a kiss filled with all the feelings they had kept hidden for months. When they separated, both were crying, but they were tears of joy, of relief, of finally finding what they had unknowingly searched for their entire lives. What do you think of Marcus's declaration? Do you believe Eleanor is making the right choice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. During the weeks that followed, they lived a secret and intense romance. When Mrs. Evelyn wasn't home, they spent hours talking, getting to know each other in ways that went far beyond appearances. Marcus told Eleanor about his youthful dreams, about how he had always wanted to be a writer before being forced to take over the family business. Eleanor spoke about her simple childhood, about how she always dreamed of having a family that truly loved each other. One night, when the moon was full and the house was completely silent, they made love for the first time. It was a transformative experience for both of them, for Marcus, because he finally knew what it was like to make love with someone he truly loved, and for Eleanor, because she gave her purity to the man who had completely captured her heart. They stayed awake until dawn, embracing, whispering promises of love, and talking about a future they both knew could be uncertain, but which they wanted to face together. But their happiness was interrupted when doctors scheduled Marcus's surgery. It was a risky operation, and he would need to remain in an induced coma for a few weeks for his brain to recover properly. The night before the surgery, he hugged her and said, "No matter what happens during this surgery, I want you to know that these have been the happiest days of my life. You gave me something I never thought I could have." "Don't talk like that," Eleanor said, caressing his face. "You're going to be fine. You're going to recover, and we'll have many years ahead to be happy together." Marcus smiled and kissed her forehead. "I'm going to fight to come back to you, I promise. But if something goes wrong—" "Nothing will go wrong," she interrupted. "I'll be here waiting for you when you wake up." The next morning, when the ambulance arrived to take Marcus to the hospital, Eleanor watched him leave with a heart heavy with fear and hope. Mrs. Evelyn went with him, and before getting into the car, she looked at Eleanor with an expression she couldn't decipher. It was as if Mrs. Evelyn knew something, but wasn't saying what it was. The first few days after the surgery were agony for Eleanor. She called the hospital 3 times a day, always asking about Marcus's condition, always hearing the same response. "Stable, but still in an induced coma. Recovery will take time." Mrs. Evelyn spent almost all her time at the hospital, returning home only to shower and change clothes, and during those brief appearances, she barely spoke to Eleanor, only giving basic instructions about house maintenance. Eleanor felt that something had changed in Mrs. Evelyn's behavior, but she couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. There was a new coldness in her gaze, a tension that hadn't existed before. Sometimes, Eleanor caught her observing her with an expression that mixed distrust and something that seemed like contempt. "Mrs. Evelyn, are you all right?" Eleanor asked one afternoon, when she saw her standing at the kitchen door, just watching. I'm perfectly fine, Eleanor, Mrs. Evelyn replied, but her tone was icy. Just thinking about some changes I need to make. She didn't explain what those changes were, but something in her manner of speaking made Eleanor feel a chill in her stomach. It was as if Mrs. Evelyn was planning something, but Eleanor couldn't imagine what it could be. During the second week of Marcus's induced coma, Eleanor began to feel strange. She was more tired than usual, and some mornings she woke up with nausea. At first, she thought it was just the stress of the situation, the constant worry about Marcus, the sleepless nights. But when the nausea started happening every day, always at the same time, she began to suspect it might be something else. It was a Thursday morning that she finally decided to take the test. She had left early to buy some household items and took the opportunity to stop by a pharmacy. Her hands trembled when she asked the clerk for a pregnancy test, and she had to repeat the request twice because her voice came out almost inaudible on the first attempt. "Is it a gift?" the clerk asked, trying to be kind. "No," Eleanor replied, feeling her face flush. "It's for me." When she got home, she went straight to her bathroom, a small space at the back of the house where the staff quarters were. She read the test instructions 3 times before using it, and then sat on the bed to wait for the result, counting the minutes on the wall clock. When she finally looked at the test, she felt as if the world had stopped. 2 clear lines. Positive. She was pregnant. Tears came instantly, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of a complex mix of joy, fear, hope, and desperation. She was expecting the child of the man she loved, but that man was in a coma in the hospital, and she didn't know if he would survive the surgery. She pressed her hands against her still flat belly, trying to imagine the life growing inside her. "Your daddy's going to be okay," she whispered. "He has to be okay, because now he has 2 reasons to fight." Eleanor decided she would tell Marcus as soon as he woke up. She imagined the expression of surprise and joy on his face. She imagined how they would plan their future together, how they would raise their child with all the love in the world. She could barely wait to share that news with him, to see how this discovery would give even more meaning to his fight for recovery. But Mrs. Evelyn had other plans. The next morning, she arrived home earlier than usual, and there was something different about her demeanor. She was more resolute, more determined, as if she had made an important decision. "Eleanor!" she called, her voice echoing through the house. "Come to the living room. I need to talk to you." Eleanor went downstairs with a heavy heart, sensing that something bad was about to happen. Mrs. Evelyn was sitting in the main armchair, with an upright posture and an expression Eleanor had never seen before. It was a mix of coldness and determination that made Eleanor feel as if she were facing a stranger, not the woman she had worked for months. "Sit down," Mrs. Evelyn said, gesturing to the armchair opposite her. Eleanor obeyed, her hands sweating with nervousness. "What happened, Mrs. Evelyn? Is there news about Marcus?" she asked, hoping it was just an update on his condition. But Mrs. Evelyn shook her head, her eyes fixed on Eleanor's face with an intensity that made her feel as if she were being scrutinized. "It's not about his condition," Mrs. Evelyn said slowly. "It's about you and what I discovered." Eleanor felt her blood run cold. "What did you discover?" she asked, her voice weaker than she intended. Mrs. Evelyn leaned forward, her hands clasped in her lap. "I know what you did," she said, each word laden with contempt. "I know you took advantage of my son while he was vulnerable and ill. I know you used the situation to get into his bed, thinking you could secure your future at the expense of our family." The accusation hit Eleanor like a punch to the stomach. "Mrs. Evelyn, it's not like that. We truly love each other." "Love?" Mrs. Evelyn laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "Do you think I was born yesterday? How many employees like you have I seen trying to take advantage of rich men? How many have I seen using fake tears and feigning affection to get what they want?" She stood up from the armchair, beginning to pace back and forth across the room. "Did you think I wouldn't notice? That I wouldn't see how you were always clinging to him? Always finding excuses to stay in his room longer than necessary?" "I cared for him because I cared," Eleanor protested, tears beginning to stream down her face. "I never wanted anything more than to see him well." Mrs. Evelyn stopped pacing and faced her with an expression of pure disdain. "Liar. You saw an opportunity, and you took it. My son was weak, scared of dying, and you took advantage of that. You seduced him when he was most vulnerable." "That's not true," Eleanor cried, standing up as well. "I love Marcus, and he loves me. It wasn't exploitation. It was true love." Mrs. Evelyn took a step towards her, her eyes blazing with rage. "True love? An employee and the heir to one of the country's most important families. Do you really believe in that fairy tale?" "I believe it because it's real," Eleanor insisted. "Our social difference doesn't matter. What matters is what we feel for each other." Mrs. Evelyn shook her head, as if Eleanor were a child saying something absurd. "Well then, prepare to discover what reality is. You're fired. I want you out of my house today." The words hit Eleanor like a slap. "You can't do that. When Marcus wakes up—" "When my son wakes up," Mrs. Evelyn interrupted, "he won't find you here to continue manipulating him. He will recover surrounded by people of his own standing, people who truly care about his well-being, not their own self-interest." "I care about him!" Eleanor cried desperately. "I love him more than anyone of that standing you're talking about." Mrs. Evelyn walked to a side table and picked up an envelope. "Here's your month's pay, plus a bonus. Consider it severance, so you don't cause trouble." She extended the envelope towards Eleanor, who made no move to take it. "I don't want your money," Eleanor said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I want to stay here, care for Marcus, be with him when he wakes up." Mrs. Evelyn placed the envelope on the table and crossed her arms. "That's not going to happen. And if you try to come back, if you try to find my son, I will make your life a living hell. I will make sure you never get another job in a family home in this city." Eleanor felt despair wash over her. It wasn't just for herself. It was for the baby growing inside her, for Marcus's child, who might never know his father if Mrs. Evelyn got her way. "Mrs. Evelyn, please, you don't understand. She almost told her about the pregnancy, but something made her stop. An instinct of protection, perhaps, or the fear that Mrs. Evelyn would do something even worse if she knew. "You're what?" Mrs. Evelyn asked, raising an eyebrow. "You're in love? You're thinking you can be part of this family? Forget it. You're nothing more than an employee who forgot her place." She pointed towards the door. "Now take your things and leave. I have more important things to do than argue with you." As Eleanor went upstairs to gather her few belongings, she could hear Mrs. Evelyn on the phone in the living room. "Yes, I want you to spread the word. The employee who worked here took advantage of my sick son. She tried to get involved with him, thinking she could secure her future. Yes, exactly. Those people have no limits when it comes to money." Her voice was cold and calculating, as if she were organizing a war strategy. When Eleanor came down with her suitcase, Mrs. Evelyn was waiting at the door. "Remember what I told you. If you try to come back, if you try to find my son, you will bitterly regret it." Eleanor looked one last time at the house where she had been so happy, where she had found the love of her life, where she had discovered she was going to be a mother. "When he wakes up, he'll want to know where I am," she said. A last attempt to make Mrs. Evelyn change her mind. "When he wakes up," Mrs. Evelyn replied, "I will tell him exactly who you really are. An opportunist who took advantage of him in the most difficult moment of his life." She opened the door and gestured for Eleanor to leave. "Goodbye, Eleanor. I hope to never see you near my family again." Eleanor left the mansion with a broken heart, carrying within her not only the pain of separation, but also the secret that she was expecting a child from the man she loved. A child who, now, due to Mrs. Evelyn's cruelty, might never know his father. 3 weeks had passed since Eleanor had been expelled from the mansion. 3 weeks that felt like an eternity. She had managed to find a small room in a cheap boarding house in downtown New York, using her savings and the money Mrs. Evelyn had given her. Money she had sworn not to touch, but which ended up being her only option for survival. Every day, she called the hospital, pretending to be a distant cousin, just to find out if Marcus had woken from his coma. The answer was always the same. Still recovering, but stable. During those weeks, Eleanor tried to find another job, but quickly discovered that Mrs. Evelyn had made good on her threat. All the families she applied to work for had already heard stories about her. "We heard you had problems at your last job," they would say with suspicious glances. "Something about taking advantage of a sick employer?" The humiliation was constant, and Eleanor realized that Mrs. Evelyn had built a network of gossip that followed her everywhere. The morning sickness was getting stronger, and Eleanor knew she wouldn't be able to hide her pregnancy much longer. She talked to the baby every night, lying in the narrow bed of the boarding house room, her hands on her belly, which was beginning to show a small curve. "Your daddy doesn't know you exist," she whispered in the dark, "but when he finds out, I'm sure he'll be happy. He just needs to wake up and discover the truth about all this." It was a Monday morning that everything changed. Eleanor was returning from the bakery, where she had bought some bread for breakfast, when she saw a familiar car parked in front of the boarding house. Her heart leaped when she recognized the driver. It was Arthur, the Sterling family's chauffeur. She hid behind a post, watching, when she saw Marcus get out of the back seat of the car. He was thinner, paler, and moved carefully, like someone still recovering from serious surgery. But he was alive. He was standing. He was awake. Eleanor felt tears of relief streaming down her face. He had survived the surgery. He was okay. Marcus looked at the boarding house building, and then at a paper in his hand, clearly looking for the correct address. Eleanor stepped out from behind the post and began to walk towards him, her heart pounding so hard she could hear the sound in her ears. When Marcus saw her, he stopped where he was, an expression of relief and love taking over his face. "Eleanor," he said, his voice still a little weak, but filled with emotion. "I was looking for you." She ran to him and threw herself into his arms, not caring who might be watching. "Marcus, are you okay? I was so worried." He hugged her tightly, as if to make sure she was real. "I was worried too. When I woke up and you weren't there, my mother told me terrible things about you." "What did she tell you?" Eleanor asked, pulling back a little to look at his face. Marcus held her face in his hands, his eyes searching hers. "She told me you had taken advantage of me, that you were only interested in my money, that you had left the city as soon as you knew I was going to recover." Eleanor shook her head vigorously. "None of that is true. She threw me out of the house, she fired me, and she threatened me." "I knew it," Marcus said, his voice filled with rage. "I knew my mother was lying. When I woke up and asked about you, she told me you had resigned because you didn't want to take care of a sick person. But I knew your heart, Eleanor. I knew you would never do something like that." He pulled her closer. "I practically had to threaten Arthur to tell me where you were living. My mother had forbidden all employees from giving me any information about you. She spread lies about me all over the city," Eleanor recounted, tears returning to her eyes. "She told everyone I took advantage of you, that I was an opportunist. I couldn't get a job anywhere." Marcus felt the rage growing inside him. "She did that? She destroyed your reputation?" Eleanor nodded, trying to control her crying. "That ends today," Marcus said with determination. "I'm going to fix all of this. I'm going to talk to every person she contacted. I'm going to clear your name." He took her hands in his. "Eleanor, I want you to come home. Come back with me. I don't care what my mother thinks or what she's going to say. I love you, and I want you by my side."
"Marcus,"
Eleanor said, her voice faltering. "There's something I need to tell you. Something very important." He looked at her with concern. "What is it? Are you okay? Did something happen to you during these weeks?" Eleanor took a deep breath, knowing this was the moment of truth. "I'm pregnant, Marcus. I'm expecting your child." The silence that followed seemed to last for hours, though it was only a few seconds. Marcus looked at her with an expression of complete shock, trying to process what he had just heard. "Pregnant?" he repeated, his voice almost a whisper. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Eleanor replied, placing her hand on her belly. "I found out the week after your surgery. I was going to tell you as soon as you woke up, but—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Marcus understood perfectly what had happened. His mother had separated them exactly when Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. Slowly, a smile began to form on Marcus's face. "A baby," he said, his voice gaining strength. "We're going to have a baby." He placed his hands on her still small belly, which already had a subtle curve. "Our child." Tears began to stream down his face. "Eleanor, this is the most wonderful gift you could give me." "Are you happy?" she asked, still a little unsure. "Even with all this complicated situation?" Marcus kissed her softly, a kiss full of love and promises. "I'm more than happy. I'm complete. You gave me an even greater reason to live, to fight, to be happy." He hugged her again. "Our child will never go through what I went through. They will grow up surrounded by true love." "And your mother?" Eleanor asked, worry evident in her voice. "What will she do when she finds out?" Marcus became serious for a moment. "My mother will have to accept it. This is my life, my choice, my family. If she can't accept that, she'll have to deal with the consequences." He held her face once more. "You and our baby are my priority now. Nothing and no one will change that." "Marcus, I'm scared," Eleanor admitted. "Your mother is a powerful woman. She can make our lives very difficult." He shook his head. "She only has power if I allow her to, and I'm not going to allow her. From today on, we're going to live our lives our way." He looked towards the boarding house building where she was living. "Get your things. You're coming home with me right now." "Are you sure?" Eleanor asked. "What if your mother doesn't let me in?" Marcus smiled, but there was determination in his eyes. "That's my house too. And if she doesn't let you in, then we'll both leave together. I'll buy a new house for us, far from her, where we can raise our child in peace." As Eleanor went up to get her few things, Marcus called his mother. "Mom, I'm bringing Eleanor back home," he told her as soon as she answered. On the other end of the line, he could hear Mrs. Evelyn breathing heavily. "Marcus, you can't be serious. After everything I told you about her." "Everything you told me was lies," he interrupted. "I found out the truth. You threw her out of the house. You spread lies about her around the city. You destroyed her reputation. All of that while I was in a coma, unable to defend myself or her." Mrs. Evelyn was silent for a moment. "I did that to protect you." "You did it to control me," Marcus replied. "But it's over, Mom. Eleanor is coming back, and if you can't accept that with dignity, then you'll have to find somewhere else to live." The threat was clear, and Mrs. Evelyn understood it perfectly. "Marcus, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious," he said. "And there's something else you need to know. Eleanor is pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother, whether you like it or not." The silence on the other end of the line was even longer this time. When Mrs. Evelyn finally spoke, her voice was filled with shock and rage. "Pregnant? She's pregnant?" "Yes," Marcus confirmed. and I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. So, you decide, Mom. Either you accept Eleanor as part of the family and treat her with the respect she deserves, or you find another place to live. The choice is yours." He hung up before she could respond. When Eleanor came down with her suitcase, Marcus was waiting with a confident smile. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "Ready," she replied, though her heart was still full of apprehension about what awaited them at the mansion. Marcus helped her into the car and sat beside her, holding her hand throughout the journey back. "No matter what happens when we get there," he told her as they approached the mansion, "remember that I love you, that I love our baby, and that nothing my mother says or does will change that." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "I love you too, Marcus, and we'll face this together." The arrival at the mansion was tense from the very first moment. Mrs. Evelyn was waiting at the main door, with an expression that mixed rage, disbelief, and something that seemed like desperation. She watched Marcus help Eleanor out of the car, her eyes fixed on the girl's belly, as if she were trying to detect signs of pregnancy. "So it's true," she said as they approached. "You really managed to completely deceive him." "No one deceived me, Mom," Marcus replied, keeping a protective arm around Eleanor. "I love this woman, and she's expecting my child. Our family is growing, and you'll have to accept that." Mrs. Evelyn took a step back, as if his words were a physical blow. "Family? You call this family? A successful businessman and an opportunistic employee?" "I call this true love," Marcus said firmly. "Something you may not understand, but which is real and precious to me." Eleanor tried to speak, but Mrs. Evelyn interrupted her before she could say anything. "And you," she said, pointing an accusing finger, "you must be feeling very clever now, aren't you? You got what you wanted. You got pregnant with my son's child to secure your future." "It wasn't like that," Eleanor said calmly, though her heart was racing. "I love Marcus, and he loves me. The baby is the fruit of that love." Mrs. Evelyn laughed, a bitter and unpleasant sound. "Love? You don't even know what that word means. All you see is an opportunity to escape poverty." "Enough, Mom," Marcus said, his voice filled with authority. "Eleanor is welcome in this house, and I will not tolerate you treating her badly. If you can't be civilized, then perhaps it's best you find somewhere else to stay for a while." The threat had an immediate effect. Mrs. Evelyn turned pale, realizing her son was serious. "Very well," she said after a few seconds, her voice controlled, but cold. "If that's what you want, I'll be civilized, but don't expect me to pretend I like the situation." She turned and walked into the house, making it clear that the conversation was over for now. But the war had just begun. In the days that followed, the tension in the house was almost palpable. Mrs. Evelyn maintained a facade of forced politeness whenever Marcus was present, but when he left for work or follow-up medical appointments, she showed her true face to Eleanor. "I hope you're enjoying yourself," she would say whenever she passed the kitchen where Eleanor was preparing something, "because this isn't going to last forever." Eleanor tried to ignore the provocations, focusing on her pregnancy and the happiness of being reunited with Marcus. He was recovering well from the surgery. Doctors had confirmed that the tumor had been completely removed, and he was gradually resuming his activities. At night, they talked about the future, about what it would be like to raise their child, about the names they would like to choose. "What if it's a girl?" Marcus would ask, his hand on Eleanor's belly, which now showed a more pronounced curve. "I always liked the name Hope." Eleanor smiled, feeling the baby move slightly under her hand. "Hope is beautiful. And if it's a boy?" "Leo," he replied without hesitation. "It means the one who supplants. After everything we've been through, I think it would be perfect." But Mrs. Evelyn was not willing to accept the situation passively. After 2 weeks of forced good behavior, She began to implement her plan. First, she tried to approach Eleanor directly with a proposal. "You seem like an intelligent girl," she said one morning when Marcus had left for work. "So let's talk like intelligent people." "What do you want to talk about?" Eleanor asked, continuing to fold the clothes she was organizing. Mrs. Evelyn sat in a nearby armchair, assuming a posture she probably thought was persuasive. "I understand your situation. You're pregnant. You need security. You want the best for your child. That's natural." "Yes, it's natural," Eleanor agreed, not knowing what Mrs. Evelyn was getting at. "And that's why I'm here with the man I love." Mrs. Evelyn shook her head, as if Eleanor were a naive child. "Love doesn't pay bills, dear. Love doesn't guarantee a child's education, but money does." Eleanor stopped folding clothes and looked directly at Mrs. Evelyn. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Mrs. Evelyn smiled, but it was a calculating smile. "I'm suggesting a solution that benefits everyone. I'll pay all your expenses during the pregnancy, guarantee you a comfortable apartment for you and the child, and also put a substantial amount in your bank account. All you need to do is disappear from my son's life." "Disappear?" Eleanor repeated, unable to believe what she was hearing. "You want me to abandon Marcus and leave?" Mrs. Evelyn nodded, as if she were making the most reasonable proposal in the world. "Exactly. You would have financial security forever, and my son could continue his life with someone appropriate for his social position. And my child would grow up without knowing his father," Eleanor said, her voice filled with indignation. "That's monstrous," Mrs. Evelyn shrugged. "Your child would grow up with all the opportunities money can buy. Education in the best schools, travel, culture, much more than Marcus could offer if you stay together and he's disinherited." The threat was clear. "Are you saying you'll disinherit Marcus if he stays with me?" Eleanor asked. "I'm not saying it," Mrs. Evelyn replied. "It's a natural consequence. The family has a reputation to uphold, traditions to preserve. If Marcus chooses an unsuitable marriage, he will naturally be cut off from the family's social and business circles." "He doesn't care about that," Eleanor said, but there was a slight doubt in her voice that Mrs. Evelyn immediately perceived. "Ah, but he should care. Without the family's influence, without the contacts, without the prestige, how long do you think his empire will last? And when financial difficulties begin, when you have to cut expenses, when you can't give your child the things they deserve, do you think love will be enough?" Eleanor felt a chill in her stomach. She had never thought about those practical consequences. "Marcus is intelligent and competent. He'll manage without the family's help." Mrs. Evelyn laughed. "Dear, you have no idea how the business world works. Everything is based on relationships, on trust, on tradition. If Marcus's own family doesn't support him, why would other investors or partners support him?" "Because he's good at what he does," Eleanor insisted, but the certainty in her voice was diminishing. Mrs. Evelyn realized she was succeeding in planting seeds of doubt. "Think about your child," she said, changing her strategy. "Do you want them to grow up amidst family conflicts, feeling guilty for having caused their father's financial ruin? Or would you prefer them to grow up with security, knowing that they were loved enough for their mother to make the necessary sacrifice to guarantee their future?" Eleanor remained silent for a few minutes, Mrs. Evelyn's words echoing in her mind. Finally, she looked directly into the woman's eyes. "Do you really believe what you're saying, or is it just manipulation?" Mrs. Evelyn maintained her serene expression. "I believe every word, and deep down in your heart, you know I'm right too." "No," Eleanor said firmly, shaking her head. "I know what I'm feeling is real. I know Marcus truly loves me, and I know that together we can overcome any difficulty." She stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. "And I know my child will grow up better in a family united by love, than in a life built on lies and manipulation. Mrs. Evelyn also stood up, her expression hardening again. Very well, you made your choice, but don't say you weren't warned about the consequences. She walked towards the door, but stopped before leaving. And Eleanor? That was my most generous offer. If you don't accept it the easy way, perhaps you'll have to accept it the hard way. The threat hung in the air, and Eleanor felt a shiver run down her spine. Mrs. Evelyn wasn't bluffing. She was truly willing to do anything to separate Marcus from Eleanor, and if the gentle approach didn't work, she would certainly try more drastic methods. When Marcus came home that night, Eleanor hesitated whether or not to tell him about the conversation with Mrs. Evelyn. She didn't want to worry him unnecessarily, especially since he was still recovering from surgery. But when he asked if everything was all right, because she seemed tense, she decided she couldn't hide anything from him. Your mother made a proposal today, she told him when they were lying in bed. What kind of proposal? Marcus asked, immediately alert. Eleanor told him everything, the offer of money, the threats of disinheritance, the insinuations about his financial future. When she finished, Marcus's face was red with rage. She had the nerve to offer you money to leave? Eleanor nodded. And she also implied that if you stay with me, you'll lose everything. Marcus sat up in bed, running his hands through his hair. Eleanor, listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you. Nothing my mother said is true. My businesses don't depend on her. My success doesn't depend on the family name. And even if it did, I would choose you 1,000 times over. But what if she really disinherits you? Eleanor asked. What if things get difficult for us? Marcus turned to her, taking her hands in his. Then we'll face the difficulties together. Eleanor, I've already lived a lifetime being rich but unhappy. I'd rather be poor and have you and our child than have all the money in the world and live empty inside. His words calmed some of Eleanor's worries, but she knew that Mrs. Evelyn wouldn't give up easily. And as if reading her thoughts, Marcus said, My mother will try other things. She doesn't give up easily when she wants something, but I promise I won't let her hurt you or separate us again. He didn't know how right he was. Mrs. Evelyn was already planning her next move, and this time it would be much more elaborate and cruel than a simple offer of money. Do you think Mrs. Millionaire'S Evelyn will succeed in separating them? What would you do in Eleanor's position? Let me know in the comments. Mrs. Evelyn's next move came in a way neither Marcus nor Eleanor expected. 3 days after the conversation about the bribe, an elegant and sophisticated woman appeared at the mansion during lunchtime. Eleanor was in the kitchen when she heard the doorbell ring, followed by Mrs. Evelyn's animated voice greeting the visitor. Serena, what a wonderful surprise. Come in, come in. Eleanor discreetly peeked through the kitchen door and saw a tall, blonde woman, dressed in a designer suit that probably cost more than Eleanor earned in 6 months. The woman had the poise of a model and the confidence of someone who had always been treated as special. Evelyn, you haven't changed at all, the woman said, kissing Mrs. Evelyn's cheek. Still as beautiful as ever. You too, dear. Serena, let me look at you, Mrs. Evelyn said, holding the visitor's hands. You're even more elegant. Paris did you good. This Serena smiled, a perfect smile that had probably been perfected over years of etiquette classes. Paris is wonderful, but nothing beats being back in the States, imagine. I discovered my Marcus is here too. My Marcus. The words hit Eleanor like a slap. Who was this woman who spoke of the man she loved as if he were her property? Eleanor kept watching, trying to understand what was happening. He'll be so happy to see you, Mrs. Evelyn said, and there was something in her tone that made Eleanor realize this visit was no coincidence. I hope so, Serena replied. I still can't believe he got sick and didn't tell me. If I had known, I would have come back immediately to take care of him." Eleanor felt her blood run cold. Mrs. Evelyn had called this woman. She had planned all this. "You were always a special girl, Serena," Mrs. Evelyn said affectionately. "That's why I always knew you were perfect for Marcus. You were made for each other." Serena smiled shyly. "I always thought the same. I remember when we were teenagers, everyone said we'd get married someday." "And you still can," Mrs. Evelyn said, her voice filled with hope. "It's never too late for true love to find its way." Eleanor couldn't listen anymore. She returned to the kitchen feeling like she was going to vomit. It wasn't just the pregnancy nausea. It was the clear realization that Mrs. Evelyn had brought back an ex-fiancé of Marcus to try to destroy their relationship. When Marcus arrived home from work that afternoon, he was greeted by Mrs. Evelyn and Serena in the living room. Eleanor watched from the stairs, seeing the shock on his face when he saw the blonde woman. "Serena? What are you doing here?" he asked, clearly surprised. "Marcus!" exclaimed Serena, rising gracefully and walking towards him. "When your mother told me about your illness, I had to come. How could you not tell me?" She hugged him, an embrace that lasted a few seconds longer than it should have, and Eleanor saw Mrs. Evelyn watching the scene with satisfaction. "I didn't think it was necessary to worry you," Marcus said, gently pulling away from the hug. "You were fine in Paris, with your life organized." Serena shook her head, her eyes shining with tears that seemed genuine. "Marcus, we were very important to each other. Of course I worry about you. I always have." "Serena came especially from Paris when she heard about your situation," Mrs. Evelyn interjected. "She canceled all her commitments. Now that's true dedication." The message was clear, and Marcus understood perfectly the manipulation that was occurring. He looked towards the stairs and saw Eleanor watching, her expression a mix of pain and concern. "Mom, I need to talk to you," Marcus said, his voice controlled but firm. "Excuse us, Serena." He went upstairs and walked directly past Eleanor, making a discreet signal for her to follow him. When they reached his room, he closed the door and turned to her. "Did you hear the conversation?" he asked. Eleanor nodded. "I heard your mother say you were made for each other, and that it's never too late for true love." Marcus ran his hands through his face, exhausted. "Eleanor, I need you to believe me. I didn't know my mother was going to call Serena. This was an ambush." "Who is she?" Eleanor asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "An ex-girlfriend?" Marcus sighed. "More than that. We were engaged 5 years ago. The relationship lasted 3 years, and everyone expected us to get married. But I ended it because I realized I didn't truly love her. It was more a social expectation than genuine love." "And now your mother brought her back," Eleanor said, the pieces fitting into her mind. "Exactly," Marcus confirmed. "Another attempt to separate us." He approached her and held her hands. "Eleanor, you need to know that I feel nothing for Serena. That story ended a long time ago. But she still feels something for you," Eleanor said. "I saw how she looked at you, how she hugged you." Marcus nodded. "Perhaps, but that changes nothing for me. I love you. I'm building a family with you. Serena is part of my past, and that's where she'll stay." That night, at dinner, the tension was almost unbearable. Mrs. Evelyn had insisted that Serena stay, and the table was set for 4 people. Eleanor felt completely out of place next to Marcus, while Serena told sophisticated stories about her life in Paris, talking about art exhibitions, dinners with diplomats, and trips around Europe. "Remember that time we went to Tuscany, Marcus?" Serena said during dessert, her eyes shining with nostalgia. "That small vineyard where we got lost for hours?" Marcus replied politely, but Eleanor could see he was uncomfortable. "I remember. It was a long time ago." "Not so long," Serena said with a sweet smile. Sometimes it feels like yesterday." Mrs. Evelyn seized the opening. "You two shared such special moments together. It's a shame you drifted apart." She looked meaningfully at Eleanor. "But maybe it's not too late to rebuild that special friendship." Eleanor swallowed, feeling increasingly inadequate. How could she, a pregnant ex-employee, compete with a woman like Serena, sophisticated, educated, from Marcus's same social class? "Excuse me," she said, rising from the table. "I don't feel very well." Marcus immediately became concerned. "Do you want me to come with you?" he asked. "It's not necessary," Eleanor replied quickly. "Stay with your friends." The word came out laden with pain, and everyone at the table noticed. Eleanor went up to the room, leaving the three of them alone. "She seems a bit unstable," Serena commented after a few minutes of uncomfortable silence. "It must be difficult for her to be in such a complicated situation." Mrs. Evelyn nodded. "Pregnancy can be very stressful, especially when the person isn't used to certain social situations." "Enough," Marcus said, his patience finally running out. "Enough with the insinuations, enough with the manipulation." He looked directly at his mother. "Mom, I know exactly what you're trying to do, and it won't work." Mrs. Evelyn tried to look innocent. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You know exactly what I'm talking about," Marcus retorted. "You brought Serena here to try to make me question my feelings for Eleanor, to show me how easy it would be to be with someone from our social class." Serena seemed confused. "Marcus, I don't understand." "Serena, I'm truly sorry you've been used this way," Marcus said, turning to her. "But I need to be clear with you. I love Eleanor. She's expecting my child, and we're going to get married. There's no possibility of reconciliation between us." Serena turned pale. "Married? Marcus, are you sure about what you're doing?" "I'm absolutely sure," he replied. "And now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to take care of the woman I love." He rose from the table, but Mrs. Evelyn grabbed his arm. "Marcus, wait! You need to think this through. This situation can destroy everything we built as a family." "No," Marcus said, pulling his arm free. "This situation is building something new and better, a family based on true love, not on social appearances." Mrs. Evelyn also stood up, her composure finally breaking. "True love? Marcus, you're being manipulated by a woman who saw an opportunity and seized it." "That's not true!" Marcus cried, his own patience completely exhausted. "Eleanor loves me and I love her, and I'm tired of you trying to destroy our happiness." Mrs. Evelyn turned red with rage. "Your happiness? What about our family's reputation and the future of our businesses, and everything your father built for decades?" "All of that will continue to exist," Marcus said. "But with Eleanor by my side, not with a woman I don't love just to satisfy your social expectations." He took a deep breath, making a definitive decision. "Mom, I'm going to say this only once, and I want you to understand it well. I choose Eleanor. I choose our family. And if you cannot accept that, if you cannot treat my wife and my child with respect and love, then you will have to find somewhere else to live." The silence that followed was absolute. Serena looked from one to the other, clearly uncomfortable with the situation she had unknowingly gotten herself into. Mrs. Evelyn was pale, her eyes wide with shock. Never in her entire life had her son spoken to her that way. "Are you throwing me out of my own house?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "I'm giving you an option," Marcus replied. "The same option you gave Eleanor when you threw her out while I was in a coma. Accept our family with dignity and respect, or find somewhere else to live your prejudices." "Marcus," Serena tried, but he interrupted her. "Serena, I sincerely regret that you've been involved in this. You are a wonderful person, but you are not the right person for me. You never were." He looked one last time at his mother. "The decision is yours, Mom, but it's final." With that, he left the dining room and went upstairs, leaving Mrs. Evelyn alone with Serena, and with the realization that she had completely lost control of the situation. Her son had made his choice, and the choice had not been her. Marcus found Eleanor sitting on the bed, hugging a pillow, with tears streaming down her face. She looked up when he entered, and he could see all the insecurity and fear she was feeling. "Did you hear the argument?" he asked, sitting beside her. Eleanor nodded. "I heard you shouting. I'd never heard you talk to your mother like that." "I never needed to," Marcus replied, pulling her into his arms. "But it was time to set boundaries. Eleanor, I gave my mother an ultimatum. Either she accepts you and our baby with respect, or she leaves this house." Eleanor pulled back a little to look at his face. "Marcus, you can't throw your own mother out because of me." "It's not because of you," he said firmly. "It's for our family, for our future together. My mother is trying to destroy something beautiful and true, and I won't allow it." He caressed her face gently. "Eleanor, I need you to understand something. No matter how many Serenas my mother brings, no matter how many attempts she makes to separate us, you are the woman I choose, today and always." "But Serena is so perfect," Eleanor said, her voice filled with insecurity. "She's sophisticated, educated, from your social class. Everyone expected you to marry her." Marcus shook his head. "Perfect on paper, perhaps, but not perfect for me. Eleanor, do you want to know why I broke up with Serena 5 years ago?" She nodded, curious despite the pain. "Because I felt empty beside her," Marcus explained. "We had everything in common on paper, the same education, the same social circles, the same expectations. But when I looked at her, I didn't feel that warmth in my chest that I feel when I look at you. I didn't feel that sense that I had found my home." He kissed her forehead. "With you, it's different. With you, I feel complete." "Even knowing this might cost your relationship with your mother?" Eleanor asked. "Even knowing it might bring problems for your businesses?" Marcus smiled. "Eleanor, do you remember what I told you when I found out you were pregnant? That you gave me an even greater reason to live?" She nodded. "Well then, nothing I could lose compares to what I gain with you." At that moment, they heard voices downstairs, followed by the sound of a door closing. Marcus got up and went to the window, seeing Serena's car leave the garage. "Looks like Serena decided to leave," he said. "She probably realized she had no place here." A few minutes later, they heard footsteps on the stairs, and Mrs. Evelyn appeared at the bedroom door. She was different. She seemed smaller, older, as if the argument had stripped her of all her arrogance. "May I come in?" Her voice was softer than it had been for weeks. Marcus looked at Eleanor, who nodded hesitantly. "You may." Mrs. Evelyn entered the room and stood for a few seconds, as if choosing the right words. "Serena left," she finally said. "She said she didn't want to be in the middle of a complicated family situation." She took a deep breath. "And I spent the last hour thinking about everything that happened." "And?" Marcus asked, his voice still cautious. Mrs. Evelyn looked directly at Eleanor. "And I think maybe I was unfair to you." The words came out with difficulty, as if she were fighting against each syllable. "Maybe I let my prejudices and fears speak louder than reason." Eleanor was surprised, but said nothing, waiting to see what Mrs. Evelyn was getting at. "I raised my son with certain expectations about his future," Mrs. Evelyn continued. "I always imagined he would marry someone from our social circle, that he would have children who would follow our family traditions. When you appeared in his life, all of that crumbled." "Mrs. Evelyn," Eleanor began, but she interrupted her with a gesture. "Let me finish, please." She sat in the armchair near the bed. "But seeing my son tonight, seeing the determination with which he defended you, seeing how he glows when he talks about the two of you, I realized something." "What?" Marcus asked. "That he never glowed like that when he talked about Serena," Mrs. Evelyn admitted, "or any other woman. That maybe what you have is truly special." She looked at Eleanor again. "And that maybe I spent so much time trying to destroy this that I didn't stop to see what truly matters, my son's happiness." Eleanor felt tears welling in her eyes. "Are you saying that—" "I'm saying that I want to try," Mrs. Evelyn said. "I want to try to accept you as part of the family. I want to try to be a loving grandmother to my grandchild." She hesitated for a moment. "I'm going to have to fight years of prejudice and expectations, but I want to try." Marcus stood up and walked towards his mother. "Mom, this means so much to me, to both of us." Mrs. Evelyn nodded, but looked directly at Eleanor. "Eleanor, I owe you an apology, not just for the things I said and did, but for the way I treated you from the beginning. You cared for my son when he needed it most, and I responded to that with cruelty." "Mrs. Evelyn, I understand it was difficult for you to accept the situation," Eleanor said generously. "But what matters is that now we can start anew." Mrs. Evelyn smiled for the first time in weeks, a small but genuine smile. "I would really like that." The weeks that followed were a gradual transformation. Mrs. Evelyn truly made an effort to change, though at times it was clear how difficult it was for her. She began to ask about Eleanor's pregnancy, about how she felt, if she needed anything. There were still moments of tension, but they were building something new together. It was during a routine checkup, when Eleanor was 6 months pregnant, that they received the news that would change everything again. "Congratulations," the doctor said, smiling as she looked at the ultrasound. "You're going to have triplets." The silence in the office was absolute for a few seconds. "Triplets," Marcus repeated, his voice almost inaudible. "3 babies," the doctor confirmed. 2 boys and a girl, all developing perfectly. Eleanor began to cry, a mix of joy and absolute shock. "3 babies," she whispered. "Marcus, we're going to have 3 babies." He kissed her, laughing and crying at the same time, 3 even bigger reasons to be happy. When they got home and told Mrs. Evelyn the news, she was silent for a few minutes, processing the information. "Triplets," she said, and Eleanor tensed, expecting a negative reaction. But Mrs. Evelyn surprised everyone. "Well, then we're going to need 3 nurseries, aren't we?" From that day on, Mrs. Evelyn transformed completely. She dove headfirst into preparations for the baby's arrival, helping Eleanor decorate the rooms, buying clothes, organizing everything with a dedication that even surprised Marcus. "I've never seen my mother so excited," he commented one afternoon, watching Mrs. Evelyn and Eleanor discussing crib colors. "I think she was afraid of not being needed in our lives," Eleanor said. "Now she realized she'll always have a special place here." And she truly did. When the babies were born, Leo, Rose, and Finn, Mrs. Evelyn revealed herself to be a completely dedicated grandmother, helping with night feedings, singing lullabies, and melting every time one of her grandchildren smiled at her. Marcus and Eleanor married when the babies were 3 months old, in an intimate ceremony at the mansion, with Mrs. Evelyn helping to organize every detail. "Who would have thought," she whispered to Eleanor as she adjusted her veil, "that the woman I tried to throw out of my house would become the best thing that ever happened to this family?" "You weren't trying to throw me out, Mrs. Evelyn," Eleanor replied with a smile. "You were protecting your son in the only way you knew how." Mrs. Evelyn held her hands. "And now I protect all 4 of you, my family." The family grew in love and understanding. Marcus fully recovered from the surgery, and his businesses prospered more than ever, not despite choosing love, but because it made him happier and more focused. Eleanor discovered she had a natural talent for helping Marcus in business, and he made sure to include her in several important decisions. The triplets grew up surrounded by love not only from their parents, but also from the grandmother, who had learned that true wealth was not in social appearances, but in genuine bonds of affection. Leo became a curious and brave boy, Rose a sweet and intelligent girl, and Finn a playful child who always managed to make everyone smile. And when people asked Mrs. Evelyn about her daughter-in-law, she would reply with pride, "Eleanor is the strongest and most loving woman I know. My son was lucky to find her, and I was lucky to learn from her what family truly means." Years later, when Marcus watched his wife playing with their children in the mansion's garden, he remembered those difficult days when he almost lost everything to the tumor. But now he knew that this illness, as terrifying as it had been, was what allowed him to discover true love. Because it was while caring for him that Eleanor showed her generous heart. And it was by almost losing his life that he learned to value it. Every difficult moment was worth it, he would sometimes tell her when they were alone, because everything brought us here. And Eleanor agreed, knowing that their love had been tested by the greatest difficulties and had emerged stronger than ever. Thus, the family that began with an employee caring for her sick employer transformed into a story of love, overcoming adversity, and unity that would last forever. And there, dear listeners, we reach the end of another emotional story. I hope you were as moved as I am every time I tell these stories of true love and overcoming. If you liked Eleanor and Marcus's story, don't forget to leave that special like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our stories, and let me know in the comments what part touched your heart the most. Tell me also, do you believe true love can overcome any social barrier? Leave your opinions below. And don't forget to share this story with that special person you know will love to hear about love that conquers all obstacles. Until the next story, and may God bless you with much love and happiness.